All right, so get this. We're diving deep into this wild meeting between President Trump, Vice President Vance, and Ukrainian President Zelensky that just happened at the White House.
At the White House.
Yeah, that was supposed to be about, this mineral deal,
Hmm.
Ukraine sharing its resources, the U.S. investing.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a win-win, right?
Well, on the surface, yeah, of course. But you got to remember, this is all happening with the war with Russia as a backdrop. And Zelensky was hoping to secure stronger security guarantees from the U.S. too.
Yeah, but things went way off script.
They did not go as planned.
It was supposed to be a negotiation, turned into this huge argument right out in the open for the world to see.
Yeah.
And guess what? The mineral deal's totally off the table.
Wow.
We're going to try to figure out why.
Yeah.
So we've got these official news transcripts, right?
Right.
We got insider chatter from Reddit, and get this, even reactions from military folks over on Telegram.
Really?
Yeah, so we've got a really interesting mix of perspectives here.
That's incredible. It really lets us dig deeper than what just happened on the surface and examine the motivations and the potential consequences.
Yeah, by the end of this deep dive, you'll understand the global shockwaves that this whole meeting has triggered.
For sure.
Okay, so rewind to the beginning of this meeting. Trump's talking about all the economic benefits of this deal, right?
Yeah.
He's bragging about companies investing billions in Ukraine.
Uh-huh.
He even drops this $500 billion figure, really emphasizing America's, economic strength and this global respect.
Okay.
What's interesting, though, is how Trump's framing the whole thing, right? He's portraying the U.S. as the savior, like the one pulling Ukraine from, the brink of economic collapse. It's very America first, focusing on the immediate benefits for the U.S.
Definitely in line with his approach.
But then Zelensky kind of brings in the reality check, right? He brings up the war with Russia.
Oh, yeah?
He pleads for more military aid, specifically air defense systems. And to really drive home the point, he shows some pretty grim images of Ukrainian prisoners of war,
Oh, wow.
really highlighting the human cost of this conflict.
So that's where that clash of perspectives really starts to come out.
Yeah.
Zelensky isn't looking for a quick economic boost,
Right.
He's dealing with an existential threat, right?
Right.
He needs security cooperation that lasts, and he's reminding everyone that Russia is a threat to everyone, not just Ukraine.
Yeah, and he even contrasts the javelins that the U.S. provided with the sheets offered by the previous administration.
Ooh, a little jab.
I know, a little dig at history there.
Yeah.
But his main point is clear, that to hold back Russia, it takes a unified front with the U.S. leading the charge.
And this is where things really start to go south.
Yeah.
Trump seems to take all this as a personal attack. Like, Zelensky's not grateful enough for what the U.S. is already doing.
Yeah.
He keeps going on about being thankful, saying Ukraine wouldn't have any cards without American help.
Right. It's almost as if he's saying, be happy with the billions we're giving you and just shut up about it.
Yeah, and that's what really elevates this from just a diplomatic disagreement.
Uh-huh.
It really shows a shift in how Trump sees foreign policy.
Yeah.
It's all transactions,
Yeah.
favors, appearances, even if it means sacrificing genuine partnership.
It's completely at odds with what Zelensky needs, right?
Right.
He needs a reliable ally in this fight for survival.
Exactly. This isn't about who owes who or who has more cards. This is about a country's very survival.
And that disconnect really blows up when Zelensky brings up security guarantees.
Yeah.
He's not looking for just a ceasefire. He wants real commitments from the U.S. and its allies that will keep Russia from attacking again. And this is where Vice President Vance jumps in.
Oh, boy. Here we go.
I know, right? Vance's entrance is a big deal because he actually steps up the attacks on Zelensky's position. He accuses Zelensky of disrespecting Trump by even bringing this up publicly, as if it's taboo to even question America's ability to deliver on his promises.
So basically, how dare you question America?
Especially with the media watching.
Right in front of everyone.
But Zelensky doesn't back down.
No, he doesn't.
He argues that Ukraine needs to feel secured, and even hints that the U.S. might feel the impact of this war eventually.
Oh, that's a powerful statement.
Right. It's like he's saying, hey, ignoring Russia won't make the problem go away. It'll just make Putin bolder and could lead to even bigger problems down the road.
And that could even pull the U.S. into a wider conflict.
Things get really heated when Trump accuses Zelensky of gambling with World War III.
Oh, wow.
And Zelensky fires back that Russia started this whole thing and they need to be stopped.
Yeah.
There's interruptions, raised voices, even moments where Zelensky looks totally shocked by how aggressive Trump and Vance are being.
It's more than just a disagreement between leaders, right? This completely destroys the idea of the U.S. as a defender of democracy and a reliable ally.
It's almost like Trump's rhetoric is coming straight from the Kremlin,
Right.
casting doubt on Ukraine's commitment to peace and downplaying how serious the Russian threat is.
Yeah, you could feel the tension even through the TV, right?
Oh, yeah. Zelensky's trying to keep calm, but you can see his frustration building.
I bet.
And then comes the moment that, for me, sums up the whole thing. Zelensky's worried about a potential ceasefire violation, and Trump says, "What if a bomb drops on your head right now?" Okay.
Seriously.
I know, right?
That's chilling.
It just shows how little empathy and understanding Trump has to this situation.
Yeah, he's treating this war like some kind of game, completely ignoring the fear and trauma that Zelensky and the Ukrainian people are dealing with.
And remember those pictures of the Ukrainian POWs that Zelensky showed?
Yeah.
Well, according to reports, they cut the meeting short right after that bomb comment. Apparently, Trump was so furious with Zelensky for not being more deferential that he ordered the Ukrainians to leave.
Without even having lunch.
Yeah, no lunch.
That's wild. That's a complete disregard for diplomatic protocol. You never see that for a visiting head of state, especially an ally who's fighting for survival.
Especially against a hostile power like Russia.
Yeah, it really highlights how personal this clash was.
Yeah.
It's like Trump's ego was driving his actions more than anything else.
So Zelensky leaves the White House looking somber and kind of shell-shocked. And the whole world's wondering, what the heck just happened?
I can't imagine what he was thinking.
Yeah, and even though he posted a message thanking the U.S. for its support later, you can't help but wonder what was going through his mind as he drove away.
Like, what now? What does this mean for Ukraine?
Exactly. And that's the question we're going to unpack in more detail after we take a look at the immediate fallout of this explosive encounter.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, so the meeting's over, Zelensky's gone, and the entire world's like, what just happened? But it doesn't just end there, right?
Yeah. Oh, no, not at all.
What happened next?
Well, one of the first things the Trump administration does is they cancel this $25 million program that was supposed to support Ukraine's energy infrastructure.
Wait, seriously? Right after publicly shaming Zelensky for not being grateful enough,
Yep.
the U.S. cuts funding for a program that's literally keeping the lights on in Ukraine.
Seems that way.
That's just kicking them while they're down, isn't it?
The timing is definitely questionable.
Yeah.
It happened so soon after the whole Oval Office blow-up that a lot of analysts see it as a pretty clear message.
Yeah, like, don't mess with us.
Exactly. Like the
Right.
U.S. is saying, we're done supporting you against Russia.
It's like Trump's trying to punish Zelensky for not just accepting the deal and for daring to ask for something more.
Yeah, but this isn't just some petty squabble.
Right. This has real consequences.
This affects millions of people.
Absolutely. And the fallout from all this goes way beyond just Ukraine.
Right.
This whole thing played out on the world stage, remember? What message does this send to America's other allies?
That's a good question. It raises some serious doubts about whether the U.S. can be trusted as a partner.
Makes you wonder who else might get thrown under the bus if they don't show enough gratitude or toe the line.
Exactly. And that's what's making so many people nervous. This situation has created this wave of uncertainty and anxiety all over the world.
So basically, the whole world is holding its breath right now.
Pretty much. European leaders especially have been trying to reassure Ukraine.
To make sure they know they're not alone.
Yeah, exactly. We saw statements of support coming from Poland, Spain, Germany, even the UK.
Even the UK.
Even the UK, despite their traditionally close relationship with the US.
So Europe's trying to step up and fill the gap left by the US.
It seems like it. Like they're trying to hold the Western alliance together without America in charge.
That's a pretty big responsibility.
It is. There are definitely concerns about whether Europe can actually pull it off. Some experts think they're still too reliant on the US.
For military and economic support.
Yeah, particularly when it comes to dealing with Russia.
Okay, so this is definitely a messy situation. But let's go back to that mineral deal for a second.
Okay.
What was actually being proposed? And why did it crash and burn so spectacularly?
Well, the full details of the deal were never made public, which just adds to the mystery.
Yeah, right.
We know that the U.S. was after access to Ukraine's huge mineral reserves, specifically rare earth minerals.
Right, those are crucial for all sorts of high-tech industries.
Exactly. Smartphones, electric cars, even military equipment. Controlling those resources would give the U.S. a major strategic advantage.
For sure. And for Ukraine, getting investment in its mining sector would have been a major economic win, especially with the war going on.
Absolutely. But as we saw in the meeting, the biggest sticking point was those security guarantees.
Right. Zelensky wanted assurances that the U.S. would back them up if Russia interfered with the mining operations or launched another attack.
Yeah, and Trump just wasn't willing to give those guarantees.
He thought the economic benefits and the vague promise of a ceasefire should have been enough.
It's important to remember that Trump has said he admires Putin and he's downplayed the threat from Russia.
Right.
Some analysts think he sees this mineral deal as a way to appease Putin, maybe even as a bargaining chip in some bigger geopolitical game.
So basically, Trump was willing to sacrifice Ukraine's security, maybe even their sovereignty, for a deal that would mostly benefit the U.S.
It's a harsh assessment, but it's a perspective that's gaining traction both in the U.S. and internationally.
It's pretty concerning.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder about Trump's judgment, his motivations, his understanding of how complicated geopolitics really is.
Absolutely.
And here's what's even more unsettling. This mineral deal disaster is just the latest in a whole string of controversies for the Trump administration.
Oh, yeah. There's been a lot. Remember that executive order he signed making English the official language of the U.S.?
Oh, yeah, that one.
That was a very symbolic move, seen by many as trying to stir up nationalist feelings and further divide the country along cultural lines.
Yeah. And then there's the whole fight over cutting Medicaid with Trump pushing for these massive reductions while trying to blame the Democrats.
It's like he's intentionally creating chaos and division at home and abroad.
So what's the connection between all that and what went down with Zelensky?
Well, some experts think it's all part of a strategy.
Like a master plan.
Yeah, a way to distract from his administration's failures and hold on to power by playing on his base's fears and grievances.
So he's creating distractions.
Right. Others argue it's just his personality. He's impulsive, he lacks experience in government, and he just doesn't get the nuances of complex policy issues.
So basically either a mastermind or completely out of his depth.
Right, but whatever the explanation, the consequences are real. We're seeing political polarization getting worse, trust in government institutions is going down, and there's this growing unease about where the country is headed.
So basically America's in a bit of a crisis.
You could say that. And on the global stage, the U.S. is looking less and less like a reliable partner. More like a country that's only interested in its own self-interest, instead of upholding the values and principles that used to define its leadership.
Yeah, like America's lost its moral compass.
And let's not forget the reactions from inside the U.S. government itself. We saw condemnation of Trump's behavior during the Zelensky meeting from both sides of the aisle. Even some of his Republican allies were worried about the damage he'd done to U.S. foreign policy and America's image abroad.
That's huge. Even Senator Graham, who's usually a big Trump supporter, called the meeting a complete and utter disaster. He even suggested that Zelensky should either resign or change.
Wow, that's a pretty harsh statement coming from someone in his own party.
Yeah, it really shows the growing division within the Republican Party itself.
Well, a lot of Republicans are still loyal to Trump. Others are getting more and more uncomfortable with his unpredictable behavior, his disregard for democratic norms, and his willingness to side with authoritarian leaders like Putin.
So it's not just the rest of the world that's worried about Trump. Even some members of his own party are having second thoughts.
Exactly. And this internal dissent adds a whole other layer of complexity to this already volatile situation.
So we've got global fallout, a potential shift in the balance of power, and even cracks appearing in U.S. politics. Where do we go from here?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And while we don't have all the answers, we can definitely analyze the potential scenarios and the key players to keep an eye on in the coming days and weeks.
So we've got this crazy situation, right? A humiliated Zelensky, a fractured Western alliance, and Putin just sitting back watching all of this unfold. What happens next?
Well, let's try to put ourselves in Zelensky's shoes. He went to the White House looking for support, some help for his country that's in the middle of a war. And instead, he gets publicly criticized and basically slapped in the face.
Yeah.
What options does he even have at this point?
Right. He must be feeling completely alone.
Yeah.
So what does he do? Does he try to smooth things over with Trump's, maybe hoping the U.S. will reconsider the deal?
Yeah.
Or does he look for support from other countries, like maybe strengthening ties with Europe?
Each path has its own risks. If he tried to make peace with Trump, it probably means making concessions, which could put Ukraine in a weaker position when dealing with Russia.
Yeah.
And pivoting to Europe means dealing with a whole bunch of different interests with no guarantee they can actually provide the support Ukraine needs.
And then there's the wild card, Putin. He's probably loving this whole mess.
Oh, yeah.
Does he see this as a chance to push even harder?
Yeah.
Maybe escalate the conflict while the West is all divided?
Putin's all about exploiting weaknesses. That's his thing.
Yeah.
And this situation is like a perfect opportunity for him. He could try to force a settlement that benefits Russia, knowing that Ukraine's support is shaky at best.
And the U.S. is basically out of the picture.
Right, this is seriously dangerous for global stability.
So lots of bad choices for Zelensky and a ton of uncertainty for everyone else.
Yep.
But who else should we be paying attention to in all of this? Who can actually change the direction things are headed?
The European Union is key. They've been supporting Ukraine with financial aid, humanitarian help, even some military equipment.
Yeah.
The question is, are they willing to do more? Can they really stand up to Russia and become the reliable partner that Ukraine needs?
That's a big question.
It is.
Can the EU even get their act together?
Right.
They have their own internal disagreements, especially when it comes to dealing with something as serious as a war.
That's their biggest challenge. They need to show a united front or their efforts won't do any good.
Yeah, because Russia takes advantage of division.
Exactly. The EU needs to overcome that if they want to make a real difference.
Okay, so what about the other major players out there?
Yeah.
China's been gaining more and more power. Do they see this as their chance to grab more influence, maybe by siding with Russia or stepping into the void left by the U.S.?
China's playing the long game here. They have a partnership with Russia, but they also don't want to mess up their economic ties with the West. I think they'll be cautious.
Yeah, play it safe.
Exactly. Trying to benefit from this chaos without making any moves that could start a conflict with the U.S.
So it's a really complicated and honestly pretty scary situation.
It is.
But ultimately, it's the people of Ukraine who are stuck in the middle of all of this.
Right.
They're the ones living through this war, facing the consequences of these power struggles.
It's true. It's easy to get caught up in the geopolitical maneuvering, but we can't forget about the human cost.
Yeah.
Millions of lives are at stake, and their future depends on what these world leaders do.
It's kind of overwhelming to think about. The fate of a nation, the lives of so many people, all resting on the decisions of a few individuals.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder about the whole system, doesn't it?
Definitely. It really highlights how complicated and often how tragic international relations can be. But it also shows how important it is to stay informed, hold our leaders accountable, and push for a world that values peace and human dignity.
This whole situation is a serious wake-up call.
Hmm.
These events aren't just headlines. They have real consequences for real people. So before we wrap up, here's a question for everyone listening. If you were in Zelensky's shoes, what would your next move be? Just think about it. You're facing a global superpower. Your country's at war. What would you do?
It's a tough one.
Let us know what you think. And that's it for this deep dive into the aftermath of the Trump-Zelensky meeting.
We covered a lot today, from the collapse of the mineral deal to the potential for a wider conflict and the uncertain future of Ukraine.
That's a lot to process.
It is, but we hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of this complex and rapidly evolving situation. As always, we encourage you to stay informed, stay engaged, and most importantly, never stop asking questions.
Thanks for listening.